Not every disaster was planned. Some of history's biggest turning points happened by pure accident. From nuclear meltdowns and collapsing bridges to exploding rockets and cities swallowed by fire, these moments reshaped the world forever. Some ended lives, others started revolutions. All of them changed history in ways no one saw coming. This is 100 accidents that changed history. Let's begin with number 1. 1. Chernobyl nuclear disaster, 1986. The night of April 26, 1986, became the world's worst nuclear nightmare. During a safety test gone wrong, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, releasing radiation hundreds of times more powerful than Hiroshima. Firefighters fought invisible death as graphite burned like blue fire. Entire towns were evacuated, but it was too late. Radiation spread across Europe. Generations suffered from cancer and birth defects. What was meant to be a test became a lesson in human arrogance and the hidden cost of atomic power. 2. Fukushima Daiichi Meltdown, 2011. March 11, 2011. A massive 9.0 earthquake struck Japan, followed by a towering tsunami that slammed into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. Backup generators drowned, cooling systems failed, and 3 reactors melted down. Explosions tore through the complex, releasing radioactive clouds into the sea and air. Japan, a symbol of technological precision, was humbled by nature's fury. The disaster reshaped global nuclear policy and reminded humanity that even the most advanced systems can fall apart in a single moment of chaos. 3 Mile Island Incident, 1979. Before Chernobyl and Fukushima, America had its own nuclear scare. On March 28, 1979, a mechanical failure and human error caused Reactor 2 at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania to partially melt down. Though the radiation release was limited, panic swept the nation. The word nuclear suddenly meant danger, not progress. Television news showed frightened families fleeing, while experts debated what went wrong. It marked the end of America's nuclear energy boom, not with an explosion, but with a slow, invisible leak of trust. 4. The Challenger Space Shuttle Explosion, 1986. January 28, 1986. Millions watched live as the Challenger lifted off into a clear blue sky. Just 73 seconds later, it disintegrated. A simple O-ring seal, hardened by cold weather, failed, tearing the shuttle apart. 7 astronauts, including teacher Krista McAuliffe, were lost. The explosion wasn't just physical. It shattered America's faith in its space program. Challenger became a symbol of both human ambition and human error, a painful reminder that even the greatest dreams can be undone by the smallest flaws. 5. Columbia Space Shuttle Disaster, 2003. 17 years after Challenger, tragedy struck again. During launch, a piece of foam insulation broke off the Columbia's fuel tank and struck its wing. NASA engineers noticed, but dismissed it. On re-entry, that tiny hole became fatal. The shuttle broke apart over Texas, scattering debris and memories across hundreds of miles. 7 more astronauts died, and NASA was forced to confront a culture of complacency. Columbia's fall showed that space exploration isn't just about reaching the stars. It's about surviving the return home. 6. The Bhopal Gas Tragedy, 1984. December 3, 1984. Midnight in Bhopal, India. A pesticide plant leaked 40 tons of toxic methyl isocyanate gas into the city. Thousands died within hours. Many more were blinded, burned, or suffocated. The poor and sleeping never stood a chance. It remains the deadliest industrial accident in history. The company responsible fled accountability, and decades later, survivors still suffer illnesses and contaminated water. Bhopal wasn't just an accident. It was a brutal collision of corporate greed, negligence, and human vulnerability. 7. Deepwater Horizon oil spill, 2010. April 20th, 2010. The Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, killing 11 workers and unleashing the largest marine oil spill in history. For 87 days, crude oil gushed into the sea, coating wildlife and shorelines in black death. The ocean burned and ecosystems suffocated. BP's reputation sank with the rig, costing billions. The world watched live feeds of the leak, powerless to stop it. Deepwater Horizon wasn't just an environmental disaster. It was a mirror showing humanity drowning in its own greed. 8. Exxon Valdez oil spill 1989. Before Deepwater Horizon, there was the Exxon Valdez. In March 1989, a massive oil tanker struck a reef in Alaska's Prince William Sound, spilling 11 million gallons of crude oil into pristine waters. Thousands of animals, otters, eagles, whales, died, and the coast was stained for years. The cleanup took decades, and some beaches still show oil today. It wasn't nature's fault. It was human carelessness, a drunk captain, and a corporation unprepared. One ship's wrong turn changed environmental laws forever. 9. The Great Fire of London, 1666. It started in a bakery on Pudding Lane, a small spark that devoured an entire city. For 4 days, London burned. Wooden homes, St. Paul's Cathedral, entire neighborhoods vanished in flame, yet from the ashes came rebirth, new architecture, fire safety codes, and a city rebuilt in stone. The Great Fire destroyed 13,000 houses, but killed surprisingly few. It taught London a painful truth. Sometimes, destruction clears the way for progress. A city of timber became a city of resilience. 10. The Chicago Fire of 1871. A dry night, a strong wind, and one spark. That's all it took. Legend says Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern, but the real cause remains unknown. What followed was 3 days of hell. 300 dead, 100,000 homeless, and Chicago reduced to ash. The fire leapt rivers, melted steel, and turned the sky red. But from ruin came innovation, skyscrapers, fireproof materials, and a new age of urban design. The Chicago Fire proved that even disaster can ignite rebirth. 11. The Halifax Explosion, 1917. December 6, 1917. In the harbor of Halifax, Nova Scotia, 2 ships collided. The French vessel Mont Blanc, loaded with explosives, and the Norwegian ship Imo. Sparks ignited the volatile cargo, unleashing the largest man-made explosion before Hiroshima. The blast leveled the city, killing over 1,900 people and injuring thousands more. Windows shattered 50 miles away, and a tsunami swallowed the harbor. Halifax was gone in seconds. But from the wreckage came modern emergency response systems. The tragedy taught the world how to rebuild after catastrophe. 12. The Hindenburg Disaster, 1937. The pride of Nazi Germany. The Hindenburg was a floating marvel, a 245-meter airship meant to symbolize the future of flight. But on May 6, 1937, as it descended over New Jersey, static electricity ignited its hydrogen-filled body. Within 34 seconds, it was engulfed in flames. 36 people perished as onlookers watched in horror. The famous words, "Oh, the humanity," captured the shock of the age. The Hindenburg wasn't just an airship lost. It was the death of an entire era of Zeppelins, burned away by arrogance and fire. 13. The Titanic Sinking, 1912. The ship that even God couldn't sink. That's what they said about the RMS Titanic. But on April 15, 1912, an iceberg tore open its side, dooming over 1,500 passengers to the freezing Atlantic. There weren't enough lifeboats. Chaos reigned as luxury turned to terror. The tragedy shocked the world, exposing how hubris and greed could sink even the grandest dream. From its wreck came modern maritime safety laws, better communication systems, and a haunting reminder: Nature doesn't care about human pride. 14. The Andrea-Doria collision, 1956. The Andrea Doria was Italy's symbol of post-war elegance, sleek, luxurious, and unsinkable. But on July 25, 1956, in heavy fog off the coast of Nantucket, it collided with the Swedish liner Stockholm. Metal tore like paper. The Andrea Doria listed dangerously before sinking the next morning. Miraculously, most passengers survived, but it ended the golden age of ocean liners. The crash revealed how, even in the age of radar, human error could turn technology into tragedy. A floating palace became a steel coffin beneath the sea. 15. The Costa Concordia capsizing, 2012. A modern echo of the Titanic. On January 13, 2012, the Costa Concordia struck rocks off the coast of Italy after its captain deviated from course, reportedly to salute the island. The ship capsized, killing 32 people. Chaos and panic spread as thousands tried to escape in the dark. The captain abandoned ship, later earning the nickname Captain Coward. The disaster exposed how negligence still thrives in modern times. Proof that even with GPS, radar bomb, and training, arrogance can still sink ships and reputations alike. 16. The sinking of the Lusitania, 1915. During World War I, the British ocean liner Lusitania was torpedoed by a German U-boat off the coast of Ireland. In just 18 minutes, it sank, killing nearly 1,200 civilians, including Americans. The attack sparked outrage and turned global opinion against Germany, pushing the U.S. closer to joining the war. The Lusitania became more than a shipwreck. It was propaganda, a rallying cry, and a symbol of innocence lost at sea. One missile reshaped the course of a world conflict. 17. The Piper Alpha oil rig explosion, 1988. The North Sea was calm that night until a small gas leak ignited a chain reaction. The Piper Alpha oil platform erupted into fire, killing 167 workers in minutes. Explosions tore through the structure and men leapt into the sea to escape the inferno. It remains the deadliest offshore oil disaster in history. Investigations revealed deadly miscommunication and neglected safety systems. The tragedy forced the oil industry to rewrite its safety rules, proving that one spark in the ocean can light up the world with lessons written in flame. 18. The Texas City Disaster, 1947. April 16, 1947. A ship named Grand Camp, loaded with 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate, caught fire in Texas City's port. Moments later, it exploded with the force of a small nuke, killing nearly 600 people and destroying the entire port. The blast shattered windows miles away, and a second ship explosion made things worse. It was America's deadliest industrial accident. From the ashes rose modern chemical safety standards and disaster management systems. One spark taught the world what happens when chemistry meets chaos. 19. The Oppau Explosion, Germany, 1921. In the small German town of Oppau, workers were breaking up solidified fertilizer using dynamite, something they had done hundreds of times. But this time, the mixture of ammonium sulfate and nitrate detonated. The explosion flattened half the town, killing over 500 people. The blast was heard 300 kilometers away. It wasn't war, it wasn't sabotage, just routine gone wrong. Oppau's destruction forced scientists to rethink industrial safety and chemical storage forever. A moment of carelessness rewrote the rulebook of chemistry. 20. The Port Chicago Disaster, 1944. During World War II, African-American sailors at Port Chicago, California, were loading ammunition onto ships under unsafe conditions. On July 17, 1944, the dock exploded with a blinding flash, killing 320 men instantly and injuring hundreds more. The U.S. Navy's negligence was exposed, and when surviving sailors refused to resume work, they were charged with mutiny. The tragedy became a catalyst for racial justice. leading to the desegregation of the U.S. Navy. From fiery injustice came a spark of equality. 21st, the Courrières mine disaster. France, 1906. March 10th, 1906. A spark deep within the coal mines of Courrières ignited clouds of coal dust and gas, triggering one of the deadliest mining disasters in history. Over 1,000 miners were killed instantly. Entire families lost fathers and sons in a single morning. For days, rescuers dug through the earth, and after 20 days, a handful of survivors emerged, starved, pale, and barely alive. The tragedy exposed poor safety standards and neglect by mine owners. It became a rallying cry for European labor rights, paid for in coal dust and blood. 22. The Bengxihu Colliery Explosion. China, 1942. Deep beneath Liaoning, China, the Bengxihu mine was already a graveyard for overworked laborers under Japanese control during World War II. On April 26, 1942, an explosion ripped through the tunnels. The deadliest mining disaster ever recorded. Over 1,500 miners were killed, many suffocating as oxygen vanished. To contain the fire, Japanese officials sealed the mine, trapping survivors inside. The victims were buried underground, denied even burial rights. The Bengxihu tragedy became a chilling symbol of exploitation, war cruelty, and industrial indifference. 23. The Soma mine disaster. Turkey, 2014. A routine day turned into national mourning. In May 2014, a fire broke out in the Soma coal mine, trapping hundreds of workers deep underground. Over 300 miners died. The worst industrial disaster in Turkey's history. Families waited for days as bodies were brought to the surface, blackened by smoke and soot. Investigations revealed neglect, faulty safety systems, and greed prioritizing profit over people. Soma didn't just bury workers. It unearthed a nation's anger at systemic corruption and industrial injustice. 24. The Aberfan disaster, Wales, 1966. A sleepy Welsh village woke to a nightmare. On October 21, 1966, a coal waste tip above Aberfan collapsed after heavy rain, sending a black avalanche of slurry crashing into the village below. The local school was buried in seconds. 116 children and 28 adults died. It wasn't nature's fault. It was negligence. Warnings had been ignored. The image of rescuers digging through mud for school children's bodies haunted Britain for decades. Aberfan changed mining laws forever, but no law could heal a village that lost its future in one morning. 25. The Mount Mulligan mine explosion, Australia, 1921. In the Queensland outback, October 19, 1921, began like any other day, until an underground explosion tore through the Mount Mulligan coal mine. A buildup of coal dust ignited, killing all 75 men working inside. The blast was so strong that it destroyed the mine entrance and echoed across the valley. With no survivors, entire families were left without fathers, sons, or brothers. The tragedy shocked Australia into enforcing stricter safety standards in its mines. A small town was left in silence and forever marked by blackened grief. 26. The Sayano-Shushenskaya Dam disaster, Russia, 2009. Russia's largest hydroelectric dam turned into a scene of destruction on August 17, 2009. A turbine exploded during maintenance, flooding the powerhouse with tons of water. The force destroyed machinery, walls, and lives. 75 workers were killed. The spill contaminated the Yenisei River with oil and debris. It wasn't a natural disaster, but one of neglect. Worn equipment, ignored warnings, and delayed maintenance. The Sayano-Shushenskaya tragedy reminded the world that even the mightiest dams are fragile when human carelessness cracks their foundation. 27. The Banqiao Dam collapse, China, 1975. The dam, built to last 1,000 years, lasted just 23. On August 8, 1975, Typhoon Nina unleashed torrential rain in Henan province. The Banqiao Dam couldn't hold. It collapsed, releasing a wall of water that swept through villages and fields. Over 170,000 people died from drowning, famine, and disease. Entire communities vanished overnight. The Chinese government covered it up for years, but it remains one of the deadliest engineering failures in history. Proof that when nature and pride collide, water always wins. 28. The St. Francis Dam Failure, USA, 1928. Built by the same engineer who created the Los Angeles Aqueduct, the St. Francis Dam was supposed to represent progress. Instead, it became a monument to tragedy. On March 12, 1928, the dam suddenly burst, releasing 12 billion gallons of water into California's Santa Clara Valley. Within hours, 400 people were dead. Homes, farms, and railways were obliterated. The failure led to massive reforms in dam engineering and safety inspections across America. From one man's overconfidence came an entire nation's awakening to the price of oversight. 29. The Valdez Dam Disaster, Italy, 1963. On the night of October 9, 1963, a massive landslide plunged into Italy's Valdez Reservoir, sending a 250-meter-high wave over the dam. The water tore through villages, killing nearly 2,000 people. The dam itself remained standing, but the people it was meant to protect were gone. Scientists had warned of unstable slopes, but greed and pride silenced them. Valdez became a tragic example of progress over people, where the mountain didn't fail, but humanity's arrogance did. 30. The Malpasset Dam Collapse, France, 1959. In southern France, December 2, 1959, the Malpasset Dam gave way after days of heavy rain. A 40-meter-high wall of water thundered through the valley, wiping out the town of Fréjus and killing over 400 people. The disaster was swift and merciless. Bridges snapped, trains overturned, and farmland vanished beneath the torrent. Investigations revealed design flaws and geological oversight. Malpasset's collapse forced Europe to modernize dam construction and risk management. A paradise valley became a watery grave, and a warning carved in stone and sorrow. 31. The Morandi Bridge Collapse, Italy. In 2018, the Morandi Bridge in Genoa, Italy, suddenly collapsed during a heavy rainstorm, sending dozens of vehicles plummeting over 150 feet. The disaster killed 43 people and exposed shocking neglect in infrastructure maintenance. Investigations revealed corroded cables and poor oversight that had gone ignored for decades. The tragedy sparked nationwide outrage, forcing Italy to reevaluate the safety of thousands of aging bridges and highways. The rebuilt San Giorgio Bridge now stands as both a memorial and a symbol of accountability born from tragedy. 32. The E35W Bridge Collapse, Minnesota. In August 2007, rush hour traffic came to a standstill on the I-35W bridge over the Mississippi River, just seconds before the structure gave way. Cars, trucks, and even a school bus plunged into the water below, leaving 13 dead and over 140 injured. The cause: a tiny design flaw in a single metal plate, overlooked for decades. The collapse exposed how small engineering errors can lead to massive consequences and reshaped U.S. infrastructure policies, leading to more rigorous inspections and billions in bridge repair funding. 33. The Hyatt Regency Walkway Collapse. In 1981, a crowd gathered in the Kansas City Hyatt Regency Hotel to enjoy a dance contest. But what followed was pure horror. Two suspended walkways suddenly gave way, crashing down onto the crowd below. 114 people were killed and over 200 injured, making it one of the deadliest structural failures in U.S. history. Investigations revealed a fatal design change during construction that doubled the weight on key supports. The tragedy forever changed engineering ethics and building code standards worldwide. 34. The Rana Plaza factory collapse, Bangladesh. On April 24, 2013, thousands of garment workers were ordered to return to work despite visible cracks in the walls of the Rana Plaza building. Hours later, the entire structure collapsed like a house of cards, killing over 1,100 people. It became the deadliest garment industry disaster in history. The tragedy exposed the dark side of fast fashion, unsafe working conditions, poverty wages, and corporate negligence. Global outrage forced major clothing brands to sign safety accords and finally address the human cost of cheap labor. 35. The Savar building collapse. The Savar building disaster is another name for the Rana Plaza collapse. The name Savar refers to the area near Dhaka where it happened. On that morning in 2013, the sound of sewing machines filled the air just before the building started to rumble and crumble. Survivors described the horror of being trapped for days under concrete and steel. This event didn't just shake Bangladesh. It shook the global conscience, leading to boycotts, reforms, and the realization that every cheap shirt can have a hidden human price. 36. The Hillsborough Stadium disaster. In 1989, what should have been an exciting FA Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest turned into one of football's darkest days. Overcrowding in the stands led to a deadly crush that killed 97 fans and injured hundreds more. For years, victims' families fought against official blame placed on supporters until investigations finally proved police mismanagement and stadium design failures were responsible. The disaster changed crowd control and stadium safety forever and became a symbol of the fight for truth and justice in sports. 37. The Heysel Stadium disaster. In 1985, during the European Cup final between Liverpool and Juventus, chaos erupted inside Heysel Stadium in Brussels. A collapsing wall, triggered by hooligan violence, led to the deaths of 39 people, mostly Juventus fans. The tragedy forced UEFA to ban English clubs from European competitions for 5 years and marked a turning point in tackling football hooliganism. It also highlighted the need for better crowd management, safer stadium designs, and the importance of sportsmanship over rivalry. 38. The 1955 Le Mans crash. The deadliest accident in motorsport history struck during the 1955 Le Mans race in France. A Mercedes car collided and exploded into the crowd, sending debris flying at over 150 mph. In seconds, 84 spectators were killed and more than 180 injured. Despite the horror, the race continued, sparking outrage around the world. This tragedy forced racing authorities to overhaul track safety, vehicle design, and spectator protection, transforming motorsport from a reckless spectacle into a more controlled, safety-conscious sport. 39. The 1977 Tenerife Airport disaster. In thick fog on the runway of Tenerife Airport, 2 Boeing 747s, one from KLM, the other from Pan Am, collided head-on. The result was catastrophic. 583 people killed, making it the deadliest aviation accident in history. Miscommunication between the pilots and air traffic control, combined with impatience and poor visibility, led to tragedy. The disaster transformed the aviation industry, standardizing English for air traffic communication and introducing strict cockpit protocols that continue to save lives today. 40. The Japan Airlines Flight 123 crash. In 1985, Japan Airlines Flight 123 suffered a catastrophic decompression mid-air after a faulty repair to its tail section. The pilots fought to regain control for more than 30 minutes before the plane struck a mountain, killing 520 of the 524 on board, the deadliest single aircraft accident ever. What makes it even more tragic is that the crash was preventable. The investigation revealed improper maintenance and repair shortcuts. The event led to massive reforms in aircraft safety, maintenance protocols, and crisis training for flight crews. 41. The Air France Flight 447 crash. In 2009, Air France Flight 447 vanished over the Atlantic Ocean en route from Rio de Janeiro to Paris. The Airbus A330 entered a high-altitude stall after its pitot tubes froze, feeding the pilot's faulty speed data. For more than 3 minutes, the jet plunged from the sky before hitting the ocean, killing all 228 aboard. The tragedy shocked the aviation world, not because of mechanical failure, but because of confusion in the cockpit. It led to massive improvements in pilot training, especially for high-altitude emergencies and reliance on automated systems. 42. The Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappearance. On March 8, 2014, Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur bound for Beijing and simply disappeared. Radar and satellite data suggested it veered off course and flew south into the Indian Ocean, where it likely ran out of fuel. Despite years of searches and countless theories, no one knows for sure what happened to the 239 people on board. It remains aviation's greatest mystery. The event pushed the world to demand better aircraft tracking, real-time black box data streaming, and international cooperation in air safety investigations. The Lockerbie bombing, Pan Am Flight 103. In December 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded mid-air over Lockerbie, Scotland, scattering wreckage and bodies across the countryside. A bomb hidden inside a cassette player brought down the Boeing 747, killing all 259 on board and 11 on the ground. The attack was later linked to Libyan intelligence agents, marking one of the deadliest acts of terrorism in aviation history. The tragedy transformed airport security forever, introducing stricter baggage screening, intelligence sharing, and anti-terror measures that reshaped global air travel. 44. The Concorde Crash, 2000. The Concorde was the pride of supersonic flight until tragedy struck in July 2000, as Air France Flight 4590 took off from Paris. A burst tire caused by debris on the runway ruptured a fuel tank, igniting a massive fire. Within seconds, the jet lost control and crashed into a hotel, killing 113 people. It was the only fatal Concorde crash in history, and it marked the end of the supersonic era. The accident exposed design vulnerabilities and rising maintenance costs, leading to Concorde's retirement just 3 years later. 45. The Tenerife runway collision. The Tenerife runway disaster in 1977 remains the deadliest accident in aviation history, claiming 583 lives. Thick fog, miscommunication, and human error led 2 Boeing 747s, KLM and Pan Am, to collide during takeoff. The KLM captain, believing he had clearance, accelerated into the fog, only to hit the Pan Am jet crossing the runway. The explosion was instant and devastating. This tragedy revolutionized aviation communication, standardizing cockpit phraseology and authority procedures that are still mandatory today to prevent another Tenerife. 46. The KLM Flight 4805 disaster. KLM Flight 4805 was the Dutch half of the Tenerife collision, one of 2 747s that met disaster on that foggy runway. The KLM captain, a highly respected pilot, believed he'd received clearance to take off, but he hadn't. A simple misunderstanding, amplified by poor visibility and pressure to meet schedules, caused the deadliest crash in aviation. The aftermath forced the aviation industry to rethink cockpit hierarchy, empowering co-pilots to challenge captains and emphasizing clear, standardized communication worldwide. 47. The DC-10 crash at O'Hare Airport. In 1991, American Airlines Flight 101 took off from Chicago O'Hare, but seconds later, its left engine detached from the wing. The plane rolled, inverted, and crashed into a nearby field, killing all 271 on board and 2 people on the ground. Investigations found that maintenance shortcuts had damaged crucial pylon structures holding the engine. The DC-10's reputation never recovered, but the disaster led to strict changes in aircraft maintenance procedures, federal oversight, and the standardization of safety inspections across all U.S. airlines. 48. The Mount Erebus Disaster. Air New Zealand Flight 901. In 1979, Air New Zealand Flight 901 was on a sightseeing tour over Antarctica when it slammed into the side of Mount Erebus, instantly killing all 257 aboard. Whiteout conditions and a navigational coordinate error led the pilots to believe they were flying over open sea when they were actually heading straight toward a mountain. The crash became a national tragedy for New Zealand. It exposed flaws in airline communication and navigation management, forever changing aviation protocols for scenic and polar flights. 49. The Helios Airways Flight 522 Disaster. In 2005, Helios Flight 522 left Cyprus for Athens, but something was terribly wrong. The cabin failed to pressurize properly, causing the crew and passengers to lose consciousness. For over an hour, the plane flew on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and crashed into a hillside, killing all 121 aboard. The eerie image of an unresponsive jet circling the skies shocked the world. The cause: a simple maintenance error and ignored warnings. It reinforced the importance of checklists, oxygen systems, and pressurization training in aviation safety. 50. The Smolensk air crash, Polish government jet. In April 2010, a Polish Air Force jet carrying President Lech Kaczynski and dozens of top officials crashed while trying to land in thick fog near Smolensk, Russia. All 96 aboard were killed. The tragedy plunged Poland into mourning and political turmoil. Investigations blamed pilot error, poor communication, and political pressure to land despite dangerous weather. The crash didn't just end lives. It reshaped Poland's government, strained Polish-Russian relations, and served as a harsh reminder that even leaders aren't immune to the perils of aviation risk. 51. The Space Shuttle Pad Fire, Apollo 1. On January 27, 1967, during a ground test for the first manned Apollo mission, tragedy struck. Astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were trapped inside their capsule when a spark ignited the pure oxygen atmosphere. Within seconds, flames engulfed the cabin, and the crew perished before rescuers could open the hatch. The Apollo 1 fire was a devastating blow to NASA, but it forced a total redesign of spacecraft safety, wiring, and materials. The lessons learned paved the way for the successful moon landings that followed. 52. The Soyuz 1 crash. In 1967, just months after Apollo 1, the Soviet Union suffered its own nightmare. Cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov became the first human to die in a space mission when Soyuz 1 malfunctioned during re-entry. The parachutes failed, and the capsule slammed into the ground at full speed. Komarov knew the craft had issues before launch, but political pressure forced the mission to proceed. His death exposed flaws in the Soviet space program's rush for prestige over safety, leading to better testing protocols and the redesign of future Soyuz spacecraft. 53. The Nedelin Catastrophe. In 1960, the Soviet Union was secretly preparing to test an intercontinental ballistic missile when disaster struck at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. A premature engine ignition turned the rocket pad into an inferno, killing over 100 engineers, soldiers, and officers, including Marshal Nedelin himself. The Soviet government covered it up for decades, calling it a plane crash. When the truth finally emerged, it became one of the worst disasters in rocketry history and a grim reminder of the dangers of secrecy and haste in the early space race. 54. The Baikonur Cosmodrome explosion. Even after the Nedelin Catastrophe, Baikonur saw tragedy again in 1963. A massive fuel explosion during rocket fueling operations killed 8 people and injured many more. The volatile fuels used in early Soviet rockets were extremely toxic and unstable. Each accident reinforced the deadly risks of pushing technological limits without proper safety protocols. These disasters, though tragic, forced engineers to rethink rocket design, fueling procedures, and worker safety, lessons that still shape space operations today. 55. The V-2 rocket test explosion. During World War II, Germany's V-2 rocket program was both groundbreaking and deadly. At the Peenemünde testing site, a prototype rocket exploded on the launch pad, killing engineers and prisoners forced to work under brutal conditions. The explosion revealed just how volatile early rocketry was. Combining liquid oxygen and ethanol fuels was a constant risk. Ironically, the V-2's technology laid the foundation for post-war American and Soviet space programs. But behind every scientific leap were human lives lost to ambition and secrecy. 56. The Kishtim Disaster, Soviet Union. In 1957, a nuclear waste tank exploded at the Mayak facility in the Soviet town of Kishtim. The blast released a massive radioactive cloud that contaminated thousands of square kilometers and displaced over 10,000 people. The Soviet government kept it secret for decades, classifying it as industrial contamination. The disaster was second only to Chernobyl in severity, but few outside the USSR knew it even happened. The cover-up and careless handling of nuclear waste revealed the chilling risks of unchecked nuclear development. 57. The Windscale Fire, UK nuclear accident. In 1957, the United Kingdom suffered its worst nuclear disaster when a fire broke out in one of the Windscale piles, graphite-moderated reactors producing plutonium. The blaze burned for 3 days, releasing radioactive iodine across northern England. Milk from nearby farms had to be destroyed, and contamination fears spread nationwide. Though the fire was successfully contained, it exposed the dangers of secrecy in nuclear programs. The Windscale disaster led to sweeping reforms in reactor design and safety, laying the groundwork for modern nuclear regulation. 58. The SL-1 reactor explosion, Idaho. In 1961, at a remote U.S. Army nuclear test site in Idaho, 3 technicians were working on a small experimental reactor called SL-1. During a maintenance procedure, one man pulled a control rod too far, triggering an instant nuclear reaction. The reactor exploded, killing all 3 workers instantly and pinning one to the ceiling with a control rod. It was America's first and only fatal reactor explosion. The accident led to massive reforms in reactor design, emphasizing automated systems and remote operation for safety. 59. The Goiânia radiation accident, Brazil. In 1987, scavengers in Goiânia, Brazil, found a discarded medical device containing cesium-137, a radioactive isotope. Unaware of its danger, they took it home, fascinated by its glowing blue dust. The powder spread through homes and neighborhoods, poisoning over 200 people and killing several. The Goiânia disaster wasn't a nuclear explosion. It was a slow, invisible tragedy. It revealed how poor waste management and lack of public awareness could turn radiation into a deadly contaminant. Brazil responded with stricter nuclear safety laws afterward. 60. The Tokaimura criticality accident, Japan. In 1999, 3 workers at Japan's Tokaimura nuclear plant accidentally poured too much uranium into a tank while processing fuel. A chain reaction began instantly, emitting intense radiation. The workers were exposed to lethal doses, and one suffered for months before dying. The town was evacuated as radiation alarms blared. The accident exposed weak safety culture and training gaps in Japan's nuclear industry. It became a turning point, forcing Japan to strengthen its nuclear regulations, less than a decade before Fukushima reminded the world again how fragile safety can be. 61. The San Juanico LPG Explosion, Mexico. In 1984, Mexico City's suburb of San Juanico was rocked by one of the deadliest industrial explosions in history. A massive liquefied petroleum gas storage facility suffered a leak that ignited, triggering a chain reaction of fireballs. The explosions turned night into day, destroying entire neighborhoods and killing over 500 people. The heat was so intense that cars melted, and firefighters could only watch from afar. The tragedy exposed the dangers of building large fuel depots near residential areas and led to stricter global standards for gas storage safety. 62. The Guadalajara Sewer Explosion. In 1992, the Mexican city of Guadalajara faced a bizarre and devastating catastrophe. For days, residents complained of a strong gasoline smell coming from the sewers. Then, without warning, a massive explosion ripped through several kilometers of streets, throwing cars into the air and splitting roads open like paper. More than 200 people were killed and thousands were injured or left homeless. The cause? Gasoline leaks from a corroded pipeline that had seeped into the sewer system. The disaster revealed catastrophic negligence in urban infrastructure and oversight. 63. The Sknyliv Air Show Disaster. What was meant to be a day of awe turned to horror in 2002 when a Ukrainian fighter jet performing aerobatics at an air show in Sknyliv lost control and crashed into a crowd. The plane exploded on impact, killing 77 spectators, including children, and injuring over 500 more. It remains the deadliest air show accident in history. The tragedy shocked the world and forced countries to tighten airshow safety protocols, banning risky stunts near crowds. It was a chilling reminder that even peaceful spectacles can become scenes of destruction in seconds. 64. The Eschede train derailment, Germany. In 1998, Germany's pride in high-speed rail turned to sorrow when an intercity express, ICE, train derailed near the town of Eschede. A single cracked wheel set off a catastrophic chain of events. Cars flew off the tracks, slamming into a bridge, which collapsed onto the train. More than 100 people were killed instantly. The disaster revealed how even advanced technology can fail from something as simple as a metal defect. It led to massive reforms in train maintenance, wheel inspection, and track monitoring, improving global rail safety forever. 60 feet, the Lac-Mégantic train disaster, Canada. In 2013, a runaway freight train carrying crude oil rolled downhill into the small town of Lac-Mégantic, Quebec. It derailed and exploded in the center of town, incinerating dozens of buildings and killing 47 people. The inferno burned for days. Investigators found the train had been left unattended with insufficient brakes. It wasn't terrorism or sabotage. It was human error and lax regulation. The event reshaped North America's transport safety laws, forcing stricter rules for unattended trains and the transport of hazardous materials. 66. The Granville Rail Disaster, Australia. On January 18, 1977, a packed commuter train derailed near Sydney, crashing into the supports of a road bridge above. The bridge collapsed onto two carriages, crushing 83 passengers to death. Rescue workers had to crawl through twisted metal to reach survivors. The cause was traced to poor track maintenance and outdated infrastructure. The Granville tragedy remains Australia's worst rail disaster, but it became a catalyst for change, leading to new engineering standards, better emergency response systems, and nationwide rail safety reforms. 67. The Quintinshill Rail Disaster, Scotland. In 1915, two trains collided head-on near Quintinshill, Scotland, creating one of the deadliest rail disasters in history. A troop train carrying soldiers to World War I crashed into a stationary passenger train, and a third train soon plowed into the wreckage. The resulting fire, fueled by wooden carriages and gas lamps, killed over 220 people, many burned beyond recognition. The cause was shocking negligence by signalmen who had falsified records. It reshaped railway signal practices and highlighted how small human errors can cause monumental tragedy. 68. The Al-Qaida bombing of USS Cole. In October 2000, the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Cole docked in Yemen for refueling. A small boat approached, seemingly friendly, but it was packed with explosives. The blast tore a massive hole in the ship's hull, killing 17 American sailors and injuring dozens. The attack, carried out by Al-Qaida operatives, was a grim warning of the growing global terrorist threat, one that would culminate the following year with 9/11. The USS Cole bombing changed how navies handled port security and counter-terrorism at sea forever. 69. The Kursk submarine disaster. In August 2000, the Russian nuclear submarine Kursk sank during a naval exercise in the Barents Sea. A torpedo malfunction triggered an explosion that destroyed the front section, trapping 118 sailors underwater. For days, rescue attempts were delayed by secrecy and bureaucracy. Some crew members survived for hours in freezing darkness, writing farewell notes before oxygen ran out. The disaster exposed the failings of the post-Soviet Navy and the dangers of outdated equipment. It led to widespread naval reforms and modernized rescue protocols worldwide. 70. The Thresher submarine loss. In 1963, the U.S. Navy's most advanced nuclear submarine, USS Thresher, was conducting deep diving tests when disaster struck. A pipe failure caused the nuclear reactor to shut down, leaving the sub powerless. It sank below crush depth, imploding under immense pressure, killing all 129 aboard. The Thresher tragedy prompted the Navy to launch the Sub-Safe program, one of the most rigorous safety initiatives ever created. Since then, no sub-safe certified submarine has been lost at sea. It remains a haunting lesson in the price of innovation and human lives. 71. The K-129 submarine sinking. In 1968, the Soviet submarine K-129 vanished in the Pacific Ocean during a secret patrol carrying nuclear missiles. The USSR searched frantically but found nothing, until the CIA secretly located the wreck 5 kilometers deep on the ocean floor. The U.S. later attempted a covert recovery mission called Project Azorian, using a massive ship disguised as a mining vessel. The operation only partially succeeded, recovering fragments of the sub and some remains. The incident remains shrouded in Cold War secrecy and paranoia, revealing just how deadly and mysterious nuclear-era espionage could be. The Seveso chemical disaster, Italy. In 1976, a small Italian town named Seveso became the site of one of Europe's worst industrial chemical accidents. A valve failure at a pesticide plant released a cloud of dioxin, a highly toxic compound. Within days, vegetation died, animals perished, and residents developed painful skin lesions known as chloroquine. Although human deaths were few, the long-term contamination and panic were immense. The disaster prompted the European Union to establish the Seveso Directive, strict industrial safety laws to prevent such chemical leaks in the future. It was a wake-up call for environmental accountability. 73. The Love Canal, toxic waste disaster. USA. In the late 1970s, residents of Niagara Falls, New York, made a horrifying discovery. Their neighborhood was built on top of 20,000 tons of buried toxic waste. The area, known as Love Canal, began oozing chemicals into basements, schools, and playgrounds, causing birth defects, miscarriages, and illnesses. Public outrage led to a mass evacuation and a national reckoning with corporate and governmental negligence. The Love Canal disaster sparked the creation of the U.S. Superfund program, forcing industries to take responsibility for environmental cleanup and forever-changing environmental policy. 74. The Minamata mercury poisoning, Japan. In the 1950s, the fishing town of Minamata began suffering a mysterious plague. Cats convulsed, children were born with deformities, and adults lost control of their limbs. The cause was traced to mercury dumped into the bay by the Chiso Corporation. The poison accumulated in fish and seafood, devastating the local population. Thousands were affected, and the tragedy became a symbol of industrial pollution's human cost. Decades later, Minamata disease remains a haunting case study of environmental negligence and corporate denial. It forced global recognition of the dangers of heavy metal contamination. 75. The Donora Smog, Pennsylvania. In 1948, the steel town of Donora, Pennsylvania, experienced an eerie, deadly fog. For 5 days, thick smog trapped pollutants from local mills and zinc plants, suffocating the town. 20 people died, and thousands fell ill with respiratory problems. The Donora smog marked one of the first times the United States recognized air pollution as a lethal public health threat. It directly led to research and eventually the creation of the Clean Air Act. The phrase Donora death fog became a grim reminder that industrial progress can come at the cost of human lungs. 76. The London Smog of 1952. In December 1952, London was choked by an impenetrable smog lasting 5 days. Caused by cold weather, coal burning, and stagnant air, it turned the city into a toxic chamber. Visibility dropped to a few feet, buses stopped, theaters closed, and people literally suffocated in the streets. Officially, 4,000 people died, but later studies suggested over 12,000 fatalities. The Great Smog shocked Britain into action, leading to the Clean Air Act of 1956. It remains one of the deadliest environmental disasters ever caused by pollution and neglect. 77. The Dust Bowl, USA. During the 1930s, overfarming and drought turned America's Great Plains into a wasteland. Crops failed, winds picked up the dry topsoil, and colossal dust storms, called black blizzards, swept across the region. Families were forced to flee their homes, migrating west in search of survival. The Dust Bowl wasn't a single disaster. It was a decade-long ecological collapse that displaced millions. It taught a harsh lesson. Human misuse of the land can destroy entire ecosystems. The tragedy spurred the U.S. to adopt soil conservation and sustainable farming practices still used today. 78. The Great Galveston Hurricane, 1900. In 1900, a massive hurricane slammed into Galveston, Texas, with winds over 135 miles per hour and a storm surge that swallowed the city. More than 8,000 people died, the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history. Bodies were buried at sea, only to wash back onto shore. The storm's sheer devastation reshaped the city, leading to the construction of seawalls and elevated buildings. The Galveston tragedy also revolutionized meteorology, driving major improvements in storm forecasting and warning systems that continue to save lives today. 79. The 2004 Indian Ocean Tsunami. On December 26, 2004, a massive undersea earthquake off Sumatra unleashed a tsunami that devastated coastlines across 14 countries. Waves as high as 100 feet struck with no warning, wiping out entire towns. Over 230,000 people died in one of the deadliest natural disasters ever recorded. The tragedy revealed how unprepared the world was for oceanic catastrophes. In response, nations established the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning System, vastly improving seismic monitoring and international disaster response coordination. It was a cataclysm that united the world in grief and change. 80. The 2011 Tohoku Earthquake and Tsunami. Japan's 2011 Tohoku disaster began with a 9.0 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful in the country's history. Minutes later, a towering tsunami struck the coast, sweeping away cities and triggering the Fukushima nuclear meltdown. Over 18,000 people were killed or went missing. The triple disaster stunned a nation known for its precision and preparedness. It exposed vulnerabilities in even the most advanced societies and reshaped global views on nuclear energy and disaster readiness. Japan's recovery efforts became a global symbol of resilience amid unimaginable loss. 81. The Haiti Earthquake, 2010. In January 2010, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake struck near Port-au-Prince, Haiti's capital, leveling entire neighborhoods in seconds. Over 200,000 people were killed, and millions were left homeless. The quake exposed decades of poor infrastructure and political instability. Buildings weren't made to withstand even moderate shaking. International aid poured in, but chaos, corruption, and lack of coordination slowed relief. Haiti's recovery became a global symbol of how natural disasters can devastate nations already crippled by poverty. 82. The Tangshan Earthquake, China. In 96, the industrial city of Tangshan was obliterated by one of the deadliest earthquakes in modern history. The 7th. 6-magnitude quake struck at dawn, collapsing nearly every structure while people slept. The death toll exceeded 240,000, though the Chinese government initially suppressed reports to maintain order. Entire families vanished overnight, factories crumbled, and even rescue workers became victims of aftershocks. The Tangshan earthquake marked a tragic turning point, forcing China to overhaul its seismic safety and emergency response systems. 83. The San Francisco earthquake, 1906. April 18, 1906. A massive 7.9 magnitude quake ripped through San Francisco, splitting the city and igniting uncontrollable fires that burned for days. Gas lines burst, water mains shattered, and the inferno consumed over 80% of the city. Nearly 3,000 people died, and 250,000 were left homeless. Despite the devastation, the rebuilding effort transformed San Francisco into a modern urban hub. The disaster also became a case study in urban planning and fire control, proving that recovery can rise from ashes, literally. 84. The Lisbon Earthquake, 1755. On All Saints' Day, 1755, as churchgoers filled cathedrals across Lisbon, a magnitude 8.5 to 9.0 earthquake struck, followed by a massive tsunami and fires that lasted for days. Tens of thousands perished, and Portugal's capital was reduced to ruins. It wasn't just a physical disaster. It shattered Europe's faith in divine order. Philosophers like Voltaire questioned religion and fate, fueling Enlightenment thought. The Lisbon earthquake forever changed how the Western world viewed science, faith, and natural disaster preparedness. 85. The Krakatoa Eruption, 1883. In August 1883, Krakatoa, a volcanic island between Java and Sumatra, exploded with such force that it was heard 3,000 miles away. The eruption generated 40-meter-high tsunamis and killed over 36,000 people. The blast destroyed most of the island, darkened skies worldwide, and dropped global temperatures. Vivid sunsets and eerie atmospheric effects followed for years. Krakatoa's eruption wasn't just geological, it was global, reminding humanity that nature can alter the planet's climate and history in a single day. 86. The Mount St. Helens Eruption, 1980. On May 18, 1980, Washington State's Mount St. Helens blew its top in a cataclysmic explosion. Triggered by an earthquake, the mountain's north face collapsed in the largest landslide ever recorded, followed by a lateral blast that flattened forests for miles. Ash spread across the U.S., turning day into night in nearby towns. 57 people died, including geologist David Johnston, who famously radioed, "Vancouver, this is it," moments before being engulfed. The eruption redefined volcanic monitoring and emergency planning worldwide. 87. The Pompeii Eruption, Mount Vesuvius. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius unleashed hell upon Pompeii and Herculaneum. Ash and pumices rained for hours, burying entire cities while pyroclastic flows, clouds of gas and rock at 700 degrees Celsius, vaporized everything in their path. Thousands died instantly, their final moments preserved in ash for centuries. Rediscovered in the 18th century, Pompeii became an archaeological time capsule, offering a hauntingly detailed glimpse into Roman life, frozen at the exact moment nature erased it from history. 88. The Tambora Eruption, 1815. Mount Tambora's eruption in Indonesia was the largest in recorded history. The blast obliterated the mountain's peak and ejected so much ash into the atmosphere that global temperatures plunged. 1816 became known as the Year Without a Summer. Crops failed, famine spread, and strange weather plagued the northern hemisphere. More than 70,000 died directly or indirectly. Ironically, the chaos inspired culture too. It was during that dark summer that Mary Shelley began writing Frankenstein. 89. The Hunga Tonga Ahunga Hapai Eruption 2022. In January 2022, the underwater volcano Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai erupted with unprecedented power, sending a shock wave that circled the globe multiple times. The blast triggered tsunamis across the Pacific, destroyed Tonga's communications, and produced the loudest atmospheric explosion since Krakatoa. Satellites captured an enormous plume reaching the edge of space. Though deaths were few, the eruption demonstrated how even remote volcanoes can disrupt global air travel, weather systems, and communications in the modern age. 90. The Lake Nyos gas disaster, Cameroon. In 1986, a mysterious silent killer struck a village in Cameroon. Deep beneath Lake Nyos, volcanic activity had trapped massive amounts of carbon dioxide. One night, the gas suddenly erupted to the surface, forming an invisible, suffocating cloud that rolled across nearby valleys. Over 1,700 people and thousands of animals died instantly in their sleep. The event baffled scientists and led to the creation of degassing systems to prevent similar tragedies. Proof that even peaceful-looking lakes can hide apocalyptic secrets. 91. The Baia Mare cyanide spill Romanim. In 2000, a dam at a gold mine near Baia Mare burst, releasing 100,000 cubic meters of cyanide-contaminated water into rivers flowing through Romania, Hungary, and Serbia. It was Europe's worst environmental disaster since Chernobyl. The toxic wave wiped out aquatic life across hundreds of kilometers. Fish floated dead, and entire ecosystems were poisoned overnight. Though no humans were immediately killed, drinking water for millions was tainted. The Baia Mare spill became a rallying cry for stricter mining and waste management regulations across Europe. 92. The Buffalo Creek Flood, USA. In 1972, a coal slurry dam in West Virginia collapsed after heavy rains, unleashing 132 million gallons of black wastewater down Buffalo Creek. The flood obliterated 17 towns in minutes, killing 125 people and leaving thousands homeless. Survivors described it as a tsunami of coal waste. The mining company called it an act of God, sparking outrage and lawsuits. The tragedy became a landmark case in corporate accountability and inspired stronger environmental and industrial safety laws in the United States. 93. The Johnstown Flood, 1889. On May 31, 1889, after days of rain, the South Fork Dam near Johnstown, Pennsylvania, gave way. A 40-foot wall of water tore through the valley at 40 miles per hour, annihilating everything in its path: houses, trains, bridges, and 2,200 lives. The wave was so powerful it carried locomotives like toys. The disaster shocked America and led to the first major Red Cross disaster relief operation. It also exposed how negligence and poor dam maintenance could turn greed into mass death. 94. The London Beer Flood, 1814. In 1814, a massive vat at the Moose Brewery in London exploded, sending over 1 million liters of beer flooding through the streets. The wave crashed into homes and pubs, trapping people inside cellars and causing several drownings by beer. While it sounds absurd today, the flood devastated poor families in the St. Giles district and revealed just how unsafe industrial operations were at the time. The beer flood remains a bizarre yet sobering reminder of how even simple pleasures can end in tragedy. 95. The Boston Molasses Flood, 1919. In January 1919, a massive storage tank of molasses burst in Boston's North End, sending a 15-foot wave of sticky syrup through the streets at 35 miles per hour. Buildings were crushed, horses trapped, and 21 people drowned in the gooey flood. Cleanup took weeks, and for decades, locals swore the air smelled like molasses. The disaster led to stricter building safety standards, as investigations revealed shoddy construction and corporate negligence. It's still remembered as one of America's strangest, yet deadliest, industrial accidents. 96. The Cuyahoga River Fire, 1969. Cleveland's Cuyahoga River was so polluted with oil, chemicals, and debris that it literally caught fire for the 13th time. In 1969, a spark from a passing train ignited the toxic surface, and while the blaze was small, the photos went viral. The idea of a river burning became a national embarrassment and a symbol of America's pollution crisis. Outrage over the incident helped spark the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and the Clean Water Act, proof that one ugly fire can ignite massive change. 97. The SpaceX Starship Explosion 2023 test. In April 2023, SpaceX launched its most powerful rocket ever, Starship, on a test flight. Minutes after liftoff, the 400-foot rocket spun out of control and exploded mid-air in a fiery spectacle seen worldwide. While dramatic, SpaceX called it a successful failure. The data gathered paved the way for design improvements. The explosion also caused environmental concerns from debris and pad damage, but in true SpaceX fashion, the company rebuilt quickly. It showed that progress sometimes requires spectacular and expensive mistakes. 98. The Tesla Factory Fire. The Tesla Gigafactory in Nevada, a massive hub for electric vehicle innovation, has faced several fires since opening. The most notable incidents occurred in 2018 and 2021, when battery materials and machinery caught fire, leading to evacuations and production halts. Though no one was killed, the fires highlighted the challenges of handling lithium-ion batteries at industrial scales. Ironically, the company aiming to build a greener future found itself battling one of the most literal dangers of its own technology: combustion. 99. The Arecibo Telescope Collapse. In 2020, the legendary Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, famous for its massive radio dish and appearances in films like GoldenEye, collapsed after its suspension cables snapped. The 900-ton receiver crashed into the dish below, ending nearly 6 decades of groundbreaking astronomical research. Arecibo had discovered pulsars, mapped asteroids, and even sent humanity's first radio message to the stars. Its fall symbolized not just an engineering failure, but the fading of a golden era in radio astronomy and scientific exploration. 100. The Notre-Dame Cathedral Fire 2019. In April 2019, the world watched in shock as flames engulfed Paris's iconic Notre-Dame Cathedral. The fire spread rapidly through its wooden roof, collapsing the spire and threatening centuries of history, art, and architecture. Parisians sang hymns in the streets as firefighters fought to save the structure. Miraculously, much of the main facade and relics were preserved. The tragedy sparked a massive global fundraising campaign for restoration and a renewed appreciation for humanity's shared cultural treasures. From a single spark to a chain reaction, every mistake, explosion, and disaster left its mark on time itself. History doesn't just remember victories. It remembers the accidents that forced us to rebuild. This was 100 accidents that changed history. Subscribe for the next chapter, where every fact reveals just how fragile our world really is.